Hello everyone. I'm so excited we finally get to do the Q&A. You guys asked a lot of good questions, so I first want to give you props for that, and as you come on, hopefully I can see comments, but definitely say hello as you come on and give a little shout out, post an emoji, something just so that you're participating, because it's lovely for others when you participate. So we're going to have a little conversation today. I've gathered all the questions. I will get through as many as I can. I have dedicated 40 minutes to this Q&A, and if there's questions left over, I am certain I could do another one. And so just kind of get yourself comfortable, pay attention to what you need. I don't know how often most of you check in with where you're really at. What does your body need? What do you need? You know, maybe when you listen to new information, you need to get a little comfy. Maybe you need to, go have something delightful to drink. Maybe you need to light a candle. Maybe you need to cuddle your dog. I don't know. But it's definitely worth it to give that energy to yourself and not do everything from a must learn, must get it standpoint. And it ties in with a conversation about menopause and hormones, because so many of our menopausal issues are actually the end result of having really driven ourselves hard. And it is something that I take very seriously, that we must learn how to meet our body, or many of these problems don't shift. And there's a gift in menopause. So we'll get to that more and more as I go through the questions. So the first question that I got on the first post that I asked for questions was someone named Susan was asking about soy and uterine cancer and where, what does she need to know about that? So I take the Chinese medicine view on soy, which is that soy builds the blood and nourishes the spleen. So I feel that if you're using soy the way that it has classically been used in classical Chinese medicine, most people will be perfectly fine, unless you have a frank allergy to soy. But it's all with soy, here's what happened, and this is what the Chinese doctors who taught me often spoke about, is that they said, we have particular ways of using soy in classical Chinese cooking. So tofu is processed with gypsum, as an example, and that's an important step actually in how gypsum is a common herb in classical Chinese medicine for calming the shen, so soothing the spirit, decreasing anxiety, etc. And all plants, it's not an accident. If people just say oh yeah, that's how they did it. No, they did it that way for a reason. There was an alchemy at play. So soy, although it does have estrogenic qualities, it's not the same as, let's say, plastics or estrogen itself. It actually has a very different quality where it helps nourish the spleen and it helps nourish the blood. So the estrogen effect is not the toxic effect. And if you're using things like tofu or miso or tempeh or a real fermented tamari, to me, those are all beautiful ways to use soy in a nourishing capacity that is actually deeply beneficial to the body. The place where I have more challenge is when people are using soy in ways that it hasn't been properly fermented or processed. And so if they're using soybeans directly, or I'm not even the biggest fan of edamame because of that, but soy can actually be very, very helpful. And with uterine cancer, my bigger concern would be what the stress levels are. With a history of uterine cancer, would be what the stress levels are. What are their emotional past resonances that are creating stasis in the low abdomen? Uterine cancer is much more a stasis pattern, so it's usually blood and chi stasis, but there's always a component with anything to do with the uterus that has an emotional and energetic component. And so you want to be addressing energetics, emotion, and physical simultaneously, which is why I've never been a big fan of you must avoid this food because of this condition, because that's all nuanced. because you could have had uterine cancer also because there was blood deficiency that created the stasis. And if that's the case, then soy in the form of like tofu or something could be very nourishing to you. But if you had horrific blood stasis, you're going to want to get the stasis moved before you start doing things to tonify. And it matters even if we've had a hysterectomy, because the thing is, the hysterectomy removes the organ that is experiencing like the deposition of stasis, but it doesn't resolve the stasis. And so you still need to go address the patterns of stasis in the body. Otherwise, they will find ways to present someplace else. So that would be my take on that question. Michelle asked about the relationship between the liver and menopause belly. There's a huge relationship. And this ties into what I was talking about at the beginning when I was saying, you know, so many women have a propensity to live, hi Nancy, in drive mode. So this drive mode is constant productivity. And what that's going to look like is that on the organ level, it engages the liver big time. And the way it engages the liver is that the liver moves into action. Your liver can be your organ of action. Now my cat's going to come in and join us. Your liver can be the organ of action. And in doing so, you can end up with a lot of liver stasis or liver constraint. That constant drive energy creates a lot of rebellious chi in the body. That rebellious chi then really affects the movement in the liver. As the liver constraint gets more constrained, then you're going to get a lack of movement of chi and blood in the body. That is going to lead to a lot of stasis. Stasis can lead then to the accumulation of damp, but also it can really diminish the body's ability to move and release what it needs to move and release. And so there's a direct correlation. But again, like we were just talking about the uterus, to work with the liver in this capacity, it isn't just a physical action, because all of the past modes that had us pushing and achieving and pushing to drive and prove our worth are all related often to patterns of unworthiness, disconnect from our body, this idea that if we aren't productive, we actually don't belong. And so we need to address those patterns too. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll give, let's say, Chinese herbs for smoothing out the liver, and it'll work for a little while, but then the person will loop themselves right back into the same pattern. And it gets harder and harder to unwind the more that we do this, which is why you often see that women start saying, but what used to work doesn't. And it's like, yeah, because your body is actually showing you that the previous mode of operation didn't work then and doesn't work now. But in menopause, she grows way less tolerant of all the ways that we used to do adaptation. And so with the liver, I find as we mix in emotional work and energetic work, I like to use some homeopathic drainage as well. So I like to do, there's a gnat in my room. I like to do maybe some Undu drainage, some single homeopathics. I might do that. I might work with Chinese herbs. I might use things like castor oil packs, red lights. I might do Qigong movement. There's a lot of things that help drain that liver, but it is essential that you get those pathways open. And this is not detox. So I cannot stress this enough. Detox is when you go in and you use substances to tell your body that it is time to work on a certain subset of toxicity or open certain pathways. But detox often negates the body's energy level, cell capacity, and where you're really operating from. So a lot of times it's almost like it kicks in the door, whereas I find that never lasts if you use sort of a kick in the door method for healing. But if instead you start working with the body's rhythms and you start working with the full nuance of the organ, so like with liver, instead of detoxing, if we work on the emotions that are stuck there, work on the belief patterns that keep us operating in a push-based model, and then we work on the physical using something like homeopathic drainage or single homeopathics or Chinese herbs combined with like Qigong working with foods that will soothe the spleen and create more space for the energy of the liver to work, then you'll actually get detox without stress. Because the last thing we want to do, and I see this all the time, is that people go like, well, that's it, I'm just going to detox. And so they create another stress pattern to solve a stress pattern, and ultimately they end up with more stress patterns. So it doesn't work. So that's how that relates. There was also a question about like having sort of a saggy belly. So the saggy belly is classic for the indicator that your connective tissue got weak, first off. So that's a spleen pattern. So when the spleen is deficient, then the connective tissue weakens and the body doesn't maintain its tissue integrity. And so we have to address the spleen in that circumstance. So you address the spleen by doing easy to digest foods like gently cooked vegetables and things like congee and grains cooked slowly in a lot of liquid and soups and broths and things like that. Avoiding too much raw, avoiding too much crunchy, hard foods. Those foods are all really hard on the spleen, as are ice cold drinks. So avoiding ice cream, ice cold drinks. That one gets a lot of people, the ice cold drinks, because I know a lot of people say, I'll only drink water if it's cold. So that often is easier to do in a stepwise progression to warmer, warmer, warmer until you're at room temperature, but it is a thing. Building the spleen is also can be helpful to work with the muscle. So that might look like doing a little bit of strength training, and then I'm also always going to be a fan of Qigong, also emotional work, because in order to work with the spleen, we have to reconnect to our own ability to feel comfortable truly being nourished. And that is a hard one for a lot of people, because again, that is tapping our open, feminine, receiving side. The emotions of the spleen on the pathological side are worry, on the beneficial side are compassion. And every person I have ever worked with in my entire career has a weak spleen, because we live in such a spleen destroying society. So sitting and overthinking. So like if you're a person who is, constantly rehashing in your head, if you're talking about things all the time, if you're solving complex problems, if you sit at a desk all day, but also if you're a person who tends to kind of perseverate on the things going on in your life, the conversation you just had with your husband or what the news said that pissed you off, these are all going to tax your spleen. So we really need to build spleen veracity and yang qi, because it's also a sign of some coldness and often some damp. So we want to be able to resolve dampness too. If you've got that sort of saggy, heavy belly, that is also another sign for damp. And so many of the spleen-based things I spoke about will also generate damp, like if you're drinking cold drinks or eating a lot of ice cream or eating a lot of raw foods or not eating at regular intervals. That's another one. Not getting enough rest. Overthinking, not taking time to tend to yourself, not deferring to your body's wisdom, not learning to speak her language. Those are all ways that actually we get a lot of damp, a lot of more of that rebellious chi, and a lot more of that weakness in the spleen. The other facet to that is also that I find in most people, there is actually a lot of emotional connection to food. We're often using food to kind of placate our emotional states. And so we're grabbing the sugar, we're grabbing the salty stuff, whatever it is, we're grabbing a glass of wine at the end of the night. It's not that any of those things are bad, but if we eat them to placate emotion, we will generate more damp, and we will really do a number on the spleen. So this is why it always comes back to, we must get proficient at learning to actually move things through our body consciously so that the spleen doesn't get weaker and we don't generate more damp. Then to drain damp, we can also use things like millet, chickweed, burdock, dandelion, and we can really create a pathway for the damp to be able to drain and no longer accumulate as much. And then you want to limit really damp generating foods like hard cheeses and lots of salty foods and too much sweet and too much cold. So those are also really important. You also want to drink to thirst. That's a big one. So a lot of people in the world have this whole ascribed like half your body weight in ounces of water a day. And so if it's like 90 degrees outside, you may very well end up drinking that. But if you drink to thirst, you will start to actually see what your body needs are. And if you overdrink, you create more damp because then your body has to process fluid it didn't want. And that can tax the kidney. Oh, Rochelle, you're so sweet. I love it. I receive it. Thank you. That can tax the kidney. And most of us really need to be building spleen so we can build kidney because the kidney chi is often so weak. Denise said, I had a hysterectomy at 37, but I'm still hot. Okay. So this kind of brings me back to the first question about hysterectomies. The things that I always want to know when someone has had a hysterectomy is, why did you have a hysterectomy? Like, was it endometriosis? Was it fibroids? Was it uterine cancer? Was it something else? Because those tell me what the patterns were before the hysterectomy. And it is surprising to most women that we still need to go back and address the original pattern often, even if they had a hysterectomy like 20 years ago. So if there was blood stasis, if there was blood stasis plus blood deficiency, if there was chi stasis, if there was toxic heat, whatever it was, we often have to address it. Now, another facet of the heat is that often when we have a hysterectomy, whether partial or full, actually, you can often really end up stressing the ovaries. Like if you did a partial, I've seen a lot of women who did a partial, but they end up having experience as if they did a full, because the ovaries get really stressed in the removal, and that ovarian stress is what starts to display the deficiency of yin and yang, which is so important because the balance of our feeling hot tells me that you probably have a deficiency of yin relative to yang. Now, the caveat there is that you may also have significant yang deficiency. So yang is like our essential fire, yin is like the moisture element of the body, if we were simplifying in this conversation anyway. And so if you have a yin deficiency, then you actually don't have enough moisture. So you're always going to experience heat relative to the amount of moisture available because they're supposed to balance each other, but in that case, they're not. And so the yin needs to be nourished. I usually use Chinese herbs to do this, but I also like to check on what is the capacity of your liver and the terrain, because if we need to build liver chi and if we need to open and reinform the liver, we might have to do that work too with some homeopathy. But it's usually an indication that that is what has happened, is that you are deficient in yin relative to yang. And until that is repaired, you're probably gonna stay hot and probably get more hot until the yang gets too deficient. And then you'll be cold and dry, which shows the progression of that one. Lisa asked about nutrition, staying athletic in menopause, and talked about gaining a belly after a major world championship. The first thing that comes to mind there is that I wonder how intense the training was. Did it leave room for your body's capacity to lead the way, or was there kind of like, nope, we just have to achieve this? One of the challenges that I see in competitive athletics with women is that that world has no regard for what your body actually wants at the time. And that pushing eventually tends to create such a level of cell survival mode that the cells drop into a really low energetic state. And when they do that, they're running in survival mode. But the problem with that is that a lot of people who have a long history of being very athletic, they are like, but I still have muscles, I can still run, I can still lift, I can still do the things. My body just needs to like behave. And the truth is that that's the way your body is showing you that she's gone past her limit. And she needs to be given help out of that survival mode, which may mean that reducing the intensity of exercise is actually the best step. And most people hate, I've worked with athletes and they don't like that piece of information. They really just want to keep the same model going. But the truth is that, see, in my background is naturopathic medicine and I have a master's in Chinese medicine. So I find that there's a lot of wisdom on the Chinese medicine side that is so valid. And they talk, the docs, I remember when I was in school, the docs said, you know, when we first came, because they were all from China, when we first came to this country, we thought we had like moved to the healthiest place on the planet. Because so many people here have like shiny face, shiny hair, like, straight white teeth and muscles. And we just thought, oh my God. But then they said, but then we started looking at tongues and feeling pulses and actually seeing patients. And we realized, oh my God, not healthy at all, like very, very sick. So many people, very, very sick, they used to say. And that was one of the things that they really stressed, was like, it is one thing to make your body appear vital and one thing to actually be vital. And having a lot of exercise capacity and stamina and lots of muscle strength does not always equate to true cellular vitality. And that was a hard one to get my mind around when I first heard it, because it was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's the standard. That's what we've been fed as the standard. But if you are doing exercise and you're not rebuilding chi, a lot of times what you're actually just doing is draining the battery. And a lot of people who do competitive sports, they just drain the battery over and over and over. And eventually the capacity of the body will diminish, because if your body can't keep up, if your organs are getting taxed and you're not keeping up with your chi production, then your body has no choice but to diminish the actual capacity of the cell. And what will happen is that as the capacity of the cell diminishes, your body starts to downregulate certain activities. The weird part about this is like, often you don't notice initially, because your body actually is trying to give you the best experience. So she will cloak the experience from you until it becomes undeniable. And that's where I've seen people who used to be competitive athletes come to me, and then, they're dealing with body pains and extreme fatigue and anxiety and sleep disorders. So my piece of advice would be to start to assess how your body actually wants to move versus what your mind thinks is next, and work with that. Learn her language, learn her capacity, start to honor it, and you'll see a massive difference in how your body responds. Carmen asked about liver cleansing. So I think I covered that in the detox section. Not a fan. You will create more stress. You will probably create more stasis. It is disruptive. It negates body intelligence. Instead, we need to open pathways. We need to nourish the liver. We need to clear the emotional blocks. We need to clear the energetic blocks. This is something where I always use homeopathic drainage or gemotherapy or individual homeopathics, maybe Chinese herbs. Those are all my favorites for actually nourishing and opening the pathways. The other question was about wild yam cream. In all honesty, I don't use wild yam, and I haven't. I am a big fan of molecular progesterone, one that is dissolved in vitamin E specifically. And I do feel that every woman in menopause and in perimenopause can benefit from vitamin E dissolved molecular progesterone. I also am a fan of pregnenolone at certain stages. I do feel that that can be very supportive. And we need to nourish these organs. But I honestly haven't used wild yam, and I've never been drawn to it. So I have to say that I probably have to bow out further on that question, saying it's never something that has actually felt resonant to me. So I use those other things. But then again, I also never use, I don't use progesterone or pregnenolone unless we're also working on the cell template and the terrain, because if you do, you can accelerate the stress response. So I don't recommend using hormones unless you're working on the cell terrain and the cell state and the deep cell stress response, which is not what you perceive to be stress, just FYI. Because a lot of people think, I'm not stressed. And their cells are like, oh girl, yes we are, when we test them. So there's such a difference, and you cannot rely on your brain's assessment of stress, because most of us have done such an adaptation to stress over time that our brain's perception is not at all what our body's perception is. So that's another piece. Tanya is asking, I have regular periods. Is it possible that I'm in perimenopause? How would I know? So I find that most women I consider most women by the time they're in their late 40s to be in perimenopause. that doesn't mean we go doing something about it. So like, there's the other thing. I think there's this notion of like, I need to start doing something about this right now. That isn't necessarily true, like from a treatment perspective, but what we all need to be doing is addressing the stress patterns that our body's holding, because what will happen in menopause is that your body will pull back the curtain to everything she's wanted you to know that you didn't know how to hear for the decades before that. And so the more disconnected we've been from our body, the harder it is. And the more connected we are, the easier it is. In fact, those same Chinese doctors, they used to say to us, we were all in our 20s for the most part. So like we had no knowledge, like no intimate knowledge of menopause, perimenopause. But they used to say they didn't understand it. They were like, I don't get it. Why are these women suffering so badly? And because they said women back home don't suffer like this. So obviously some people pop in with, because they eat like tofu and stuff, which may play a role, but it's actually the difference is I think how hard we are on ourselves actually, and how we don't process our emotions, and most of our movement is aggressive throughout our life. Like a lot of the docs I knew, they practice Tai Chi and Qigong, even the female docs too. And whereas we're kind of taught like to go again, do the exercise that has no consciousness to it, where we're just like running on the treadmill or doing the elliptical. We're trying to get our 10,000 steps. And so there's a big difference between the elements of body connection in that case. And so it's really important that we do the body connection piece, because that makes a big difference. And in menopause, your body is going to make it very apparent as to what she has not been getting. And some people, this is why I'm not the biggest fan of immediately going to hormones, because if you go to hormones, you're not actually answering the question. You're not learning the language. And so first comes connection, regulating cell patterns, and then come hormones, because in that order, you've actually created connection and relationship, which also means you need far less hormones to accomplish the same thing. But you also won't be taxing the system, because that's the big danger with hormones, is that you actually clog the liver more. And if you're already in performance mode and then you clog the liver more, that's where I believe we see a lot of the future problems of hormonal cancers and all kinds of problems that I think most women are trying to avoid. Belinda asked about the body aches, the belly fat, and the dryness. So the body aches are chi stasis. And so this goes back to conversations that we've had in this. So if you're joining at this point, like go back and listen to it when it's posted. But if there's a lot of chi stasis, you will have pain. So any pain anywhere in the body is indicative that there's a lack of essential movement. This does not always mean you haven't been moving, because some of you may be achy and you're like, I move all the time. It's the micro movement that is associated with smooth, even flow of your life force through your tissues. If you're in performance and production mode, the odds are that you're moving into chi constraint to keep going. And that's why the joint aches are there, is that chi needs to move and it's not being moved. And so we want to learn how to move the chi and do the deep body connection so that it feels safe for your body to move the chi, because that's what will ease so much of the achiness actually. And I know a lot of people will say, but the studies show that means I need estrogen. So it may be a call for hormones, but if we don't move the chi, it won't matter. Because if you do estrogen and your chi is voraciously stuck, you're actually going to compound the problem big time. So please first go to, how can I move my chi? What is my body saying? How can I learn her language? Like, do the partnership piece first. And often it does wonders. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times that it's someone learns some Qigong and they're like, my God, my joints feel amazing. It's like, yes, see, it wasn't a call for estrogen. It was a call for the chi to move. And now you feel good. That's the important part. That's like the most important thing. Same thing with the dryness, because we talked about that above, the yin deficiency, that dryness. Now, there's other layers to the dryness, especially if we're talking about vaginal dryness. So when it comes to vaginal dryness, it was so fun. I'll tell you guys, I was just talking. So I had a brick and mortar practice for ages, and there was a woman who came to me off and on, and she always just says like, oh, I consider you my doctor, like to this day. She's, I think, 68 now. And we chatted today about this dryness. And what I love about her is that she is so in touch with her emotions. So it was very easy to differentiate. We just need to do a little help to these tissues to balance out, because I know that she's not holding emotion. This lady is like anyone here, she could be your dream of what being 68 would feel like and look like. Like, she's so alive. She's so connected to her body. She's so into her husband. Like, she was like making jokes like, at least I have a clit, because at least that provides pleasure, even if like I can't do the other stuff. She was all excited about the whole thing, even with the dryness. So in her case, I know that the dryness was local. And so we could do things like yoni steaming or DHEA suppositories. We talked about doing some nourishing foods. We talked about doing some body sesame oil massage followed by a bath. Like we did more like these nourishing practices for her, because I know that she doesn't need the emotional side of things. But I see in a lot of women that the dryness is also related to a lot of things that they've harbored in themselves about sex. Like, oh, it's just an obligation. Like, that's all people want from me. Like, if I don't give it, my husband gets moody, so fine. It's kind of like that, like, oh, this is such a chore energy. And if that's the case, there's a lot of emotion stuck in the pelvis. We want to go meet that emotion. We want to learn how to feel it. We want to like be able to hear the voice of our yoni. We want to be able to know, like, what is my uterus actually saying? What does she want? What does she need? What is my pleasure? What's my relationship to pleasure? Like, how else do I get pleasure in my life? How do I indulge in that? What's my fun? How do I connect to that? Those are all really important questions to ask yourself. And also asking yourself, like, what comes up for me around sex? Like, some women will tell me like, well, sex was just something I did, because I was a wife, or because I wanted to get pregnant, or because my husband needed it, but like they don't have their own template for that pleasure. So cultivate that. What is your template for pleasure? What is your body's yes or no? Do you honor it? For the times that you didn't honor it, can you go back and do some forgiveness work with yourself and talk to your pussy and be like, girl, I am so sorry. Like, I just blasted past every one of your cues. I didn't listen, both when you wanted pleasure and when you didn't. Like, I'm so sorry. Can we repair this relationship? Talk to her. Meet her. Can you place your hand on her and just talk to her? Can you start to interact with her as a vital part of your body, like as vital as your eyes and your heart? Because I think that is, for so many people, like that connection was never made, and it's so important. And I have had women reestablish that connection and be like, I am juicy as all get out. Well, yeah. Because can you imagine, like, for most of us, like, our pussy is something that we're like, oh, I stuck a tampon up there, or my guy or my girl like did whatever they do and I just laid back, or it's like something we interact with out of obligation, but not out of like, yes, like, oh my God, you are so pretty and I love you so much. So go explore those things. Those would make a big difference. And then it's looking at, do we need to do other supportive work? Do we need to work on those other levels? And then that work will land so much better and so much easier and feel so good. So just know this. I have tons of clients who are like grabbing their husband, in their 70s and like, let's go. And they never thought they'd get back there because they didn't have a libido, but their libido was a direct result of how tired their cells were and how disconnected they were to their body. And when they did the work of reclamation, they were like, oh my God, it's back. Like, I have a libido and it feels good and sex feels good. So just know it is multifaceted. It is not just one thing. Let's see. Kathleen says, I was on birth control to the age of 56. having hot flashes, fatigue. How do I do this without HRT? Okay. The first thing is that if you were on birth control for an extended period of time, there is recovery work that has to be done. Birth control is a stasis generator of impressive magnitude. I took it for 5 years, so like I've been there, you guys. Like I only took it for 5, thank goodness. And that was partially because in my 20s, early 20s, a naturopath said to me, get off that drug. And I was like, you got it. Like the look in your face is so serious. Like I never took another pill. And as I learned more, I could totally understand why she said that. Like if the statistics are daunting, you guys. Like I'm not even gonna go into them here, because quite honestly, I don't need to create fear. But I just want you to know that it is a call to do repair work with our body. And so we need to open those pathways. We need to nourish. We also need to clear toxic estrogen, because the truth is that the fake progesterone, the synthetic progesterone, acts like an estrogen. Doesn't act like a progesterone. It acts like estrogen. And so even in like a low estrogen pill, you've basically, to your body, you've been being given lots of estrogen-like compounds and not supportive ones. So you cannot go quickly detox that. The only way to do that is actually to reclaim the energy at the cell, reclaim cellular thyroid function, and then do the gentle reclamation work with the liver. And that takes time, and it is a process. It does not go quickly. I feel there's also emotional work that has to be done after the pill. And I feel like the studies that evidence that when women are on the pill, they actually can't detect the pheromones of men that are a good match for them. That like blew my mind when I read that study, which I could not cite it. Please don't ask me to. The way my brain works is I read stuff and then it's like, okay, I've collected that. But other people have talked about that. But it's so important because that tells us that it's altering more than just hormones. It's altering our nervous system. It's altering our emotional system. It's altering our energetic template. And so there's a lot of reclamation work that we need to do. And we have to do it gently because you guys, our bodies are so delightfully sensitive. And so we don't ever want to do the kick the door down therapy is like so key. And so just, it is possible, but it is essential. Like if you're a person who took the pill for an extended period of time, please know this can be unwound. It will take time, and it is really important because doing that work will lower your risk of a whole lot of conditions that are predicated from having taken the pill for a long time. FYI. Let's see. Colleen is asking about, weight gain. Rosanna was asking about that too. So the weight gain, I feel, is a combination of things. One is that a lot of times we've been kind of like significantly cellular hypothyroid, and then when we shift to menopausal transition, that gets magnified with the hormonal shift. It's like some of the other hormonal cycles were cloaking it a little bit, and that's often when women say, like, I used to be able to just do some harder workouts, lift some heavier weights, and it would move, but now it's not. And that is because your body, with the hormonal shift, I always call it pulls back the curtain, and it kind of goes like, oh, by the way, this has been a challenge of mine for a while. I just didn't show it to you, and now I have to show it to you. And so it's an invitation to start working with the body and to work from that cellular perspective and the emotions all associated with it. I have personally seen that weight has a lot to do with not trusting our body, actually fearing our body, fearing food, like to where we get pathologically afraid of food and we're like, that food's bad, you can't eat that, I can't eat that. You know, we've all heard, or maybe you've said it yourself, like, oh my God, if I even look at a cupcake, I gain 10 pounds. That all tells me that over time, society did a great job of implanting a whole lot of belief about food, and that makes it even harder for our body to take food in because we've just established like it's good, it's bad, but our body kind of works in absolutes. So unfortunately, if there's a bunch of food that's bad, eventually our body's like, all food's bad. And then it is a big challenge to use it. Now, the spleen is one of the key organs in digestion that is responsible for like grabbing. When the food's in the stomach, the spleen is differentiating like keep, don't keep. So it's grabbing pure chi. When the food goes into the small intestine, which is the lower pair to the heart, then there's a further differentiation of keep, don't keep. And I always think of it as like for me, not for me. And I trust my small intestine completely. Like, I know that my small intestine could eat something toxic. Not that I'm going to intentionally feed myself something toxic, but I trust my small intestine so much that I actually know if I eat something that she, in her wisdom, connected to the heart and the deep void of true consciousness, determines, like, not for Julie, like she will grab it, sequester it, and be like, this thing is leaving the body, and she'll take care of it. But the more that we get disconnected from ourselves, the more that we kind of are inhabiting that void space of the heart, which actually makes it that the small intestine gets disconnected from her governance. And then we get a lot of inflammatory accumulation, and this with the spleen and the spleen damp, and then we start craving foods and we start placating our emotions with sugar, and the dampness grows, and it like all compounds. So the medicine is always to really look at what is the cell state, what is the stress state, what is the spleen state, what is our connection to the heart, what is our connection to our deep, true consciousness, what is the heart's connection to the small intestine. Notice, I didn't say we need to kill off everything that's living in the small intestine that's pathological, because guess what? I actually feel like that is an endless game of whack-a-mole that you begin on. And I have found repeatedly that if we regulate the other way, we don't have to play the game of whack-a-mole. So I'm not a big fan of that game. Yep, Lorraine, like if you took the pill, then Depo, then yeah, Marina a little less so. I mean, at least it's local, but it is local synthetic progesterone, and so it is more, more local estrogen-esque effects. The other aspect to that is that when we have chronic stress, our body keeps reabsorbing copper to try to keep you responsive to the stress, and the unbound copper has no place to go, so your body shoves it into the tissues. Guess what? Copper acts like in the tissues. Ding, ding, ding. It acts like estrogen. So the chronic stress response can put you into an estrogen accelerated state, the same way that like consuming too much, estrogen-esque foods, which can take us to like things like, please don't drink from plastic, like the non-hard plastic, like when you get, I have an image in my head. I wish you guys could see in my head, of like the water bottles that are, the plastic is really weak, because those, they get heated, you're going to get the microplastics act like estrogen, etc. Like there's all those sources, but I actually find that our own stress response is a bigger source for most of us than the environment, sadly. And so we want to watch for those exogenous sources as well, but this is why we have to pay attention to our own like stress response, what we're doing. Did we repair the pathways if we did take the pill for a lot of years, or we used those kind of things, because it really matters. Ellie had asked, how do you open the liver? So we've already kind of talked about that, so you can go back through. I'm going to answer a few more questions, even though I'm 45 minutes in, but you guys, I love answering questions. So this is my jam right here. What we're doing is my jam. Delilah asked about hot flashes that don't stop no matter what. This is usually a combination. We talked previously, so if, again, you can go back and listen. We talked about the balance of yin and yang, and that usually tells me that you have yin and yang deficiency. Just the yin is probably more deficient than the yang. I usually see this when people have had they've had a lot of intensity, basically. A lot of intensity. So they've been in go mode and performance mode a lot, or they actually have literally survived a lot, which I know many of you have survived so much in your life, which I fucking love about you. And it might mean that we have to do some toning to your nervous system in order for your cells to actually be able to cultivate yin and yang and hold it, because maybe they can't because they're burning so hot, trying to keep you going, staying in that survival mode. And so that's often the case. In that case, I would probably use some homeopathic drainage, maybe some herbs, and then the cell work right along with it, and then the emotional work and the energetic work as well. Donna asked about weight, digestive issues, extreme bloating, and headaches. That all, again, points me to spleen being weak, the liver being stuck in stasis, and then the disconnect from the body is probably creating a lot of endotoxin, which is creating a lot of disarray in the gut, which is creating a lot of metabolic byproducts, which is creating the headaches. That was a long, like, this. But it's how it tends to work in the body. And so it takes us all back to the basics that I keep mentioning. We need to do the body connection work. We need to soothe the liver. We need to build the spleen. We need to build the kidney. We need to drain the stasis and the pathway so we can open them back up. That's where I use a lot of homeopathic drainage and gemotherapy, single homeopathics. And then we need to reinform. Such a big part of healing is giving the body back the information she needs to remember how to do her work. It is never telling her what to do. Not even one time. We start telling the body what to do, I swear to God, she gives us the finger and like closes her ears and is like, I'll just wait till you're done. I swear that's the image I get. I'm a very visual person. And I just see her like, I'll wait till you're done. You're at it again, I see. So we don't ever tell her what to do. We are always working with methods that are helping her remember, but never telling her. I don't ever want to circumvent her intelligence. This is my big problem with like aggressive detox, even with a lot of forms of chelation. It's my big problem with heavy hitting use of hormones, because all of it is like basically kind of telling the body, shut up. I know what's going on here. And I don't know about you, but when I think of it that way, I'm sort of like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like I want, your body's like the only temple that you live in for your whole life. Like to me, the body is God's temple. And so, and it was made by a force of intelligence that I can't even fathom, because thank God I'm not responsible for like which pathways are running right now. Because good gracious, like I don't have capacity to direct the trillions of things that are happening in my body right now. So why is it that I would suddenly be like, y'all are stupid and I'm going to tell you what to do? Like, I always ask, like, when I started to think this way many years ago, it was like, if I take responsibility for directing certain pathways, am I saying I'm up for directing them all? Because then I was like, no. So it's like, instead, if you trust that the pathway works and it's just in a state of amnesia, and if you gave it the right information, it would remember, and you operate that way, it is a lot kinder. It's super gentle. And your body's response is like, you trust me? Heck yes. And that divine intelligence keeps flowing. And so we're connecting back to that too. I think it's so key. And I think that this is the cornerstone. I believe that this is where medicine is meant to go. I think there were times in the past, I do believe classical Chinese medicine is all based off of this kind of understanding. But we need to come back to that, where it's collaborative with our body, not this whole authoritarian, like, just shut up and do it kind of thing. So that is the core of my principle. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. Oh, thanks you guys. Danny, I saw your comment, and Nancy. So I'm going to end here. I actually have a full 2 pages of questions left. So I will schedule time to do more, because this was already 50 minutes. And I am just My heart is just bursting with all of you beauties who have hung out with me as I've answered these questions, because it was a long time together. So I'm so grateful, and I hope it was really helpful. And I just think you all are magnificent. And I know that you're in this group because you care about yourself, and you care about your body, and you care about your experience in the world. So I really honor that. And that's why I wanted to do this Q&A, because you all are, you're really paying attention, and that matters so much to me. If you've listened to this and you are like, okay, I want to know specifics, then set up a call. I am not scary. You can sit down and talk to me for free. And if you don't want to work with me, I won't be upset or, chase you down or anything. Like, I really just want you to thrive. So if this has sparked that, please feel free to set up a call, reach out. You could message me, you can ask for the link. But I hope you have a beautiful evening. I hope this has opened some doors of awareness for you and ways to interact with your body differently. I love you. You're magnificent. Please just keep believing in you. You are so worth it. Bye, guys.